All right, hello everybody and welcome back. Today we are in lesson 4 of unit 10 and we're going to be talking about the presidency of Richard Nixon, and specifically in this part 2 of lesson 4 we're going to be covering the foreign policy of President Nixon. So get out your journals and pick up where you just left off last time with Mr. Fox. So President Nixon is going to be very involved in foreign policy. Foreign policy is when our country is dealing with other countries in the world. And remember, the Cold War dominates this time. Cold War, we're fighting against communism, but we're giving them the cold shoulder. It's a different kind of war, right? Not constantly going pew, 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 pew. It's a different kind of war with nuclear weapons, ideas, who will dominate, who will flex better. Our ideas, democracy and capitalism versus the Soviet ideas of communism. Okay, so we're against communism. Well, and Nixon believes that the way that the Cold War has been fought up to this point is wrong, that previous presidents, they have not been doing things very smart, and just ask Nixon, he would tell you he was the smartest guy in the room. And so he believes that the old idea of containment, where we are meant to stop the spread of communism, an idea that had originated back with the Truman Doctrine, President Truman in the 1940s and 1950s, was wrong. That instead of wasting all these supplies and time, fighting endless wars against communism for fighting against communism's sake, we should rather spend our efforts more intelligently and basically economically. And we should forget these old, tensions and try to create a new world order. This was called détente. Now, I know you might be thinking of like a Spanish word that is similar called detente or something similar, because I'm not a Spanish speaker, so I could be butchering that terribly. But usually my students think of stop. Detente, they think of stop, okay? Now in French, this is similar, détente, French, the language of love, okay? In French, détente, we're talking about basically what this means is kind of slow it down, okay? An easing of tensions in the Cold War. We're gonna calm things down because things up to this point with the Soviet Union and with China and with North Korea and with Cuba and with North Vietnam have been very, very tense. And we've actually had wars and had nuclear missiles being threatened at us. Remember in 1962, the Cuban Missile Crisis. And so with détente, what Nixon wants to do is just kind of calm things down. Like, hey, let's just be chill about this, guys. Let's try to work out a new agreement where maybe we're not always having to be so tense with our nuclear weapons aimed at each other. So called easing of the bowstring. Let's calm things down. Détente, okay? And a key craftsman helping Nixon to formulate these détente strategies that we'll see Nixon use in his foreign policy will be his Secretary of State, this guy right here, who was a Holocaust survivor, a Jewish man named Henry Kissinger, Mr. Henry Kissinger. So that is Nixon's Secretary of State helping him do a lot of this stuff. The new Soviet leader, because Nikita Khrushchev, he can't last forever, the new Soviet leader at this time will be Russian Premier Leonid Brezhnev. There we go. My printer agreed. Leonid Brezhnev, okay? So we go from Stalin to Khrushchev to Brezhnev. They like them Russian names because they're from Russia. That's where the Soviet Union is. And as part of this détente, Nixon will begin to actually talk things through with the Soviet Union. And what he's ultimately trying to do is put a rift, like kind of drive a wedge between the Soviet Union and China to leverage their conflict with each other into basically a strategic win for us in the Vietnam War. And so he's like, well, if I can cozy up and look like America's getting friendly to the Soviet Union, maybe China will want to get on our side too and curry favor with us so they're not left behind, so that they can have a relationship with us too. And who is China's little communist brother right below them? Well, that's Ho Chi Minh, and that's North Vietnam. I guess by this point, Ho Chi Minh was dead, but you get the idea. Like, we can exert some influence here. Nixon's basically playing like 4D chess with foreign policy. Good job on him. He was a brilliant guy, even if he was a slimy sleazeball. So we're going to get with the Soviet Union, with Brezhnev, in this détente policy, the strategic arms limitation treaties. START 1, START 2, the SALT treaties, as they're called, the SALT talks. And not a lot comes from it, but I think just the fact that we were in talks with the Soviet Union to agree to reduce the amount of nuclear warheads in the world was significant. That is important. That in the SALT treaties, strategic arms limitation treaties, arms are like nuclear weapons, limitation, we're trying to limit it. Okay, it is significant that both sides are willing to talk. It seems like a little, but they're willing to at least talk about having less nuclear missiles. Because remember, like back under the military industrial complex era of the 1950s, during the beginning of the arms race, like we were just cranking out thousands of nuclear missiles. Oh, atomic bombs ain't working anymore. Let's go hydrogen, 1,000 times more powerful. Let's build 1,000 of them. Let's blow up islands in the Pacific, like Bikini Island. We were just going crazy. And so it is significant here in the early 70s under Nixon that we are taking a step back. We are trying to limit the proliferation of nuclear warheads because these are weapons that have the capabilities, especially with thousands of them stockpiled, to destroy the world thousands of times over. So us just being in talks to maybe not build so many, or maybe even to reduce the supply that we already have, those are significant. Good job, Nixon. You're talking about good stuff. Too bad that other stuff you're gonna do. So we have here a lovely cartoon showing the United States eagle, our mascot, got its arm wrapped around the Soviet Union bear mascot, and they got this little baby, that's detente, okay? The odd couple. Hey, we haven't gotten along so far, but now maybe we can talk to each other. Maybe we can ease some tensions. Remember, that's called, again, detente. Speaking of detente and playing our two communist enemies off one another, the other big communist power out there since 1949 is old China. And we have been giving China that cold shoulder for quite a while. We have not been talking to China. We want nothing to do with China. We're like, you want to be communist? We don't have anything to do with you. So that's been the situation in our relationship with China since 1949 when Harry Truman was president. And now that we are in talks with the Soviet Union, China is a little bit more willing to maybe talk with us as well. They're maybe willing to get in on some of that detente action. And so Nixon is going to make a surprise trip out to China in 1972. Nixon's trip to China, it's going to shock the world. Like, whoa, where did this come from? Well, actually, Kissinger had been going over to China and like in talks and setting all this up. He's Nixon's foreign policy dude. So they got this set up on the sly, and then Nixon goes over there. And it's the first time an American president had ever gone over to China. And he's actually going to meet with the Chinese Communist father of the nation, father of the People's Republic of China, Mao Zedong. There is Nixon meeting with like Mao. That was pretty significant. They joked a little, but they talked and stuff. Nixon tours the Great Wall of China, and he meets with the Chinese president, and they see Nixon's wife, Pat Nixon. She visits some of the towns there and stuff. And it really is going to be the trip that opens China to the Western world again, and that will renew the relationship between the United States and China, especially, most importantly, our economic relationship. Talking about that money, okay? Because if you think about stuff made in China, I bet I could find some stuff within arm's reach, stuff that says made in China. I had to literally just put my hand out and I found something. So much of the stuff that we buy and we have here in the United States is made in China. And this is a very important economic relationship in the world today. Our trade that we do with China, their trade that they do with us, it's been somewhat very limited because of the Trump administration and not having a free trade agreement that stalled and everything else, and having sanctions and other things. But if you're trading with a country, you're typically not going to be at war with that country. Nixon's trip to China will reestablish the relationship, the ties between our countries, and will allow us to begin trading with China once again. And you trading, you're not fighting. Okay, it keeps the world at peace. Even if we don't like China, even if they don't like us, we're not at war with them. Things are tense. They certainly are very tense, but we don't want war with each other. So this is going to be a step in the right direction. This is part of detente. This was in 1972. We reopened our trade and our talks with the communist nation of China, which is right above Vietnam. Okay, So now Mao and his communist Chinese governments, maybe they can talk to their little communist brother, North Vietnam, and maybe work something out. Because in 1973, Nixon, following his Vietnamization strategy we talked about earlier, remember, where you are basically slowly withdrawing American forces and allowing the South Vietnamese to take over this war themselves so we can get out of there. Nixon will have completed his Vietnamization by 1973 and will finish withdrawing American forces and will sign basically the peace accords, the Paris Peace Accords, saying that, victory with honor. China has talked to North Vietnam and we've agreed to help basically South Vietnam be free. It works. China offered some influence there to pressure the North Vietnamese to back off the South. It's not going to last, though. Remember that within 2 years, Saigon will fall. And by 1975, that's when the North has taken back over the South and it's just one Vietnam. So for a little while there, it looked encouraging. And this relationship with China will be very meaningful and will be lasting, and it will be what we have with China to this day. Now, what is Nixon known for? Nixon is known for being the only president in our history that ever resigned the office of the presidency. He's the president with the Watergate scandal. All right, so the Watergate scandal is going to actually occur on the election year when Nixon is running for re-election in 1972, that June. Okay, so in June of 1972, there is this committee to re-elect the president, established by G. Gordon Liddy, who was the financial counsel for this committee to re-elect Nixon. Now, I'm just saying, committee to re-elect the president, that acronym actually spells out creep. So if you have an organization that's literally called creep, it's probably not a good thing. But anyway, this committee, G. Gordon Liddy, they are going to be involved in basically deciding that they want to burglarize the campaign headquarters of Nixon's opponent, George McGovern, in the 1972 presidential election. And when they burglarize it, there's 5 dudes gonna go in catsuit burglar, knights, black outfits. They're gonna go and break into the Democratic presidential nominees' campaign headquarters, and they're going to steal a lot of information, and they're gonna plant listening devices like bugs in all the telephones there. Now, the headquarters of Nixon's opponent, George McGovern, was in Washington, D.C. at this hotel complex. It's in that picture down at the bottom of the screen. That's called the Watergate Hotel. Okay, so this is going to be why it's called the Watergate scandal. And this becomes the most famous scandal in all of American political history. So when you talk about any type of political scandal today, usually you put a gate on the end of it, like Watergate, Monica Lewinsky gate, all these gates. It means a big political scandal. So that is the situation. The 5 burglars, they break in that night in June 1972 to the Democratic campaign headquarters to plant some listening devices and steal some stuff. They want to guarantee Nixon a victory, and it's done by this committee to re-elect the president, okay? Well, the night guardsman there at the hotel, he noticed something suspicious. There was tape on the doors, to keep the doors from fully shutting. And so he alerted the police, and the police catch the burglars red-handed. And so they go to jail and they're being interviewed. And the more is uncovered about this, the more suspicious this seems. It seems like this could go all the way to the top, okay? And so being implicated in these burglaries is not just the committee to re-elect the president, not just the White House, but maybe the president of the United States himself. Did Nixon order this break-in? Okay. Nixon, of course, denies any wrongdoing. And in the 1972 election, he wins overwhelmingly, very easily, getting reelected. But this scandal persists. It's going to continue to haunt Nixon as reporters such as Bob Woodward and Carl Bernstein of the Washington Post continue to pursue this story, and they uncover a deep informants that basically knows what Nixon has been up to. Nixon has been using his power as president to intimidate others and get his way. He's been using the FBI, the CIA, even the IRS as like, you know, his own private security force to threaten political opponents so that he can always, you know, get his way. And the guy who's got the lowdown is actually the assistant director of the FBI. But he won't let his identity be revealed to these reporters as he talks to them. So he goes by the very famous nickname Deep Throat. Please do not laugh. Don't be that sort of teenager that laughs at that. But that is where that famous name comes from for an informant, okay? Because this was the assistant director of the FBI who was informing and basically saying, this is what Nixon's been up to, guys. And so these reporters continue to chase the story and say that this goes all the way up to the president. And eventually there's going to be investigations opened by the House of Representatives and the Senate into Nixon's illegal activities, you know, and interfering in his election, in the campaign, interfering with his political opponents, silencing critics, using the government, you know, to basically keep his own power, abusing his authority. Like, all this is going to be investigated in Congress, and it becomes clear that there's actually evidence to be found, because Nixon, he was such a paranoid man that he actually had these recordings in the Oval Office of the White House. It's like this tape recorder you can see behind me here in this picture. Basically, a secretary would tap a button at his desk outside the Oval Office, and then this recorder would pick up everything, every conversation that was being had secretly under the desk there. And so when it's discovered that there are tapes, you know, recording Nixon in the Oval Office, people want to hear that. Like, this could confirm whether Nixon was telling the truth and he had nothing to do with all this illegal activity, or it could prove that maybe Nixon was involved. But we needed to hear the tapes, and Nixon refused to hand them over. So this becomes a Supreme Court case, the United States versus Nixon. And in the United States versus Nixon, the Supreme Court of the United States will actually order the president to hand over the tapes. See, Nixon was claiming executive privilege, which means he's saying, because I'm the president, I don't have to follow the laws like an ordinary citizen. I can do whatever I want. And the Supreme Court said, no, you can't. Presidents have to follow the law too. Presidents are not above the law. They are the first citizen, but they are a citizen of this country, and they have to follow the laws like everybody else. And so the Supreme Court ordered Nixon to hand over the tapes. And the tapes will prove that Nixon had been involved. Now, he might not have ordered the burglary of the Watergate Hotel, the burglary of his political opponent in the 1972 election, but he was involved in many illegal things. And in particular to the break-in at Watergate, he had actually, as soon as his guys from CREEP had told him what had happened and that the 5 burglars had been caught by the police, Nixon immediately began doing a cover-up operation to hide their involvement. That's not right. So he was caught red-handed with the cover-up to the Watergate scandal, and he was caught red-handed doing many other acts where he was abusing his authority and intimidating people using the power of the presidency. And so, caught on tape with this incriminating evidence, and with the United States House of Representatives filing charges of impeachment against him, Richard Nixon will resign the presidency. Now, Nixon will not actually be impeached. He resigns, or basically quits the presidency before that could happen. You know, he came on television and he'd been telling people all along, like, I am not a crook. I've worked hard for everything I have. You know, Nixon, there he is in that cartoon. I am not a crook. I am a crook. But yeah, we caught him on tape that he actually was lying, that he did have involvement in this. There's direct evidence of him, like, you know, saying he when he ordered the cover up of the Watergate break-in and stuff. And so with this evidence and with the impeachment trial looming over him, Nixon resigns. He quits the presidency. He's the only president ever to do this. So that is Richard Nixon. Now, about a month after his vice president takes over, his vice president was a guy named Gerald Ford. Nixon will be pardoned. Very controversially, he will be pardoned by his vice president Ford, when Ford's now the president, and basically forgiven of all of the crimes that he had committed. So he didn't have to suffer the consequences of his actions. And I think that I will leave it there, that it's the end of lesson 4, and I'll just leave you with those thoughts about the Watergate scandal, and hopefully you can draw modern parallels with certain leaders we've had in recent times who have broken laws and are facing trials and consequences. And these questions of whether the president should be held to a higher standard or whether they should be judged by the same standard as any other American. You know, the Supreme Court in United States versus Nixon said that presidents are not above the law. So I think that's a very interesting place to leave it at. Thank you guys so much. Don't forget to do your summary, and I will, as soon as I can stop this recording, talk to you guys later. Thank you. Bye.